I'm going to go ahead and start with my talk, and I guess if the others are able to get on, they'll get on as they come on.
Right.
Anyhow, this is, of course, a new month, which means I come up with a new theme each month, uh, and I've chosen a theme that I think is pretty foundational to our science of mind, religious science teachings and philosophy. Uh, because we put a great deal of emphasis on what is occurring between our ears here, because we call it the science of mind, and rightfully so, because we know that what occurs in our minds informs everything in our lives, from our relationship with the divine to our relationship with ourselves to our relationship with others, and with our work, our money, our play, our health, and the list goes on and on, that it affects all of us. And it hopefully helps us to understand, in a time of trials and tribulation and chaos, why Martin Luther King would even say, do not, he used the law of nonviolence, meaning we don't lay down and take what's happening, and we don't ignore what is happening, but that you approach it with a different mindset. And so that's why I thought I would go into more about how the mind works in our philosophy and what have you. And so it just occurred to me that it might be wise if we focused our attention to some of that valuable real estate that we have there. And so I've entitled the theme for this month, Minding the Mind. And I've entitled the first talk, that just blew my mind, just to add some emphasis to it. Maybe it's an aha moment or something of that nature. But I just want to remind you, as Millie said in our prayers, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And the mind ordinarily works through the five senses on the human nature side. And then the connection between the spiritual and the human side is through the breath. And that's why we frequently say, breathe in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth, because that helps make the connection between the spiritual and human side clearer, and you're connecting with that parasympathetic or spiritual side of you. Because remember, you do have a power that's breathing you and beating your heart, and that's the parasympathetic, that's the spiritual side of you. And so we connect to that side through the breath, is what I'm getting at. And I'll go into that more about what happens when we're in the human side of our thinking and when we're in the spiritual side of our thinking, because that's where the nonviolence comes in, is to go into the parasympathetic or the spiritual side of thinking. But to set the tone for today, I want to share a quote from Holmes. Now, I'm not talking about Ernest Holmes nor Sherlock Holmes, but the former Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes is who I'm talking about. And he once said this: a mind that is stretched can never go back to its old dimensions. A mind that is stretched can never go back to its old dimensions. And I don't know if you've ever had your mind blown when you've taken on a new spiritual concept and then never been able to look at life in the same way again, or not. But I do remember my first encounter with religious science of mind teachings, because and I was late in life learning this. It was in 1988 when I was first walked into a religious science church in Nashville, and where I was living in Nashville, Tennessee, and I heard Dr. Mitch Johnson say something about that God was not a man up there in the sky sitting on a cloud wearing a gold G on his chest and judging me, which is what I was brought up in my Southern Baptist upbringing was to be, that God was, I was to be fearful of God, that I was, had to be a good little girl and do the right things. Well, David, there you are. Glad to have you. I don't know. I'm already doing my talk, so I'm going to continue for now. Okay. But anyhow, David looks good with his new camera, but I'll have to set that. But anyhow, the first time I walked into this religious science center there in Nashville, and Dr. Mitch Johnson was talking about that God was not this figure in a cloud sitting up and judging us, but that rather I heard it for the first time really to understand it, that God is the energy of all life and the creative impulse behind all things and the very essence of love, and that everything is created of this energy, including me, and meaning that I am God in form and God in expression. And that's when I first came up with the expression that we're all godlings. We're little godlings. At least I like that expression. But anyhow, it finally dawned on me that I was part of this energy, that everything was energy, and I was part of that energy and a spark of that energy. And I related it very much to the Paul when he was on the road to Damascus and was blinded by the light. I mean, I think that was his mind-blowing experience or aha moment of realizing, and he in the beginning was a non-believer completely until he had the experience on the road to Damascus. And I don't know if any of the others of you have had such an experience or not, but probably have in some ways or another. And we'll talk about those in a little bit if you'd like to. But it is our intention to blow your minds in such a way today, in a very real and important way. Well, maybe not literally blow your minds or explode any purple powder coming out of them or anything like that, but expand your minds in such a way that you can't go back to your old way of thinking. But first, I want to explore how the mind works. And as I said, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And when we're in the human side of us using our senses, we react to our environment oftentimes with fear. And what fear creates is fight, flight, or freeze. And that's the pattern that you go through when you're in that state of mind. To access the spiritual side of us, or the parasympathetic side, you then are in rest, digest, and create. And so if you're in a fearful state of mind, there's no way you can create a peaceful environment. And that's why we say, if you find yourself in a very fearful or agitated or angry or state of any kind, to stop, breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth, to access that parasympathetic side of you so that you can be centered and go into the create what you desire to have. Do you follow me? Am I making any sense to you? Okay, good. But I want to read and unpack a powerful message from Ernest Holmes, which comes from the Science of Mind textbook that is our textbook for our philosophy. And the first part of it may seem obvious to you, and you will probably agree with it. However, there is a sentence at the end of it which could bring up some stuff for you if you have any questions. But bringing up the stuff so we can have our minds blown, well, I'll settle for expanded if you don't need you don't mind, is the plan for today. So let's unpack the passage, and it could be found on page 295 in the Science of Mind textbook. As God's thought makes worlds and peoples, them with living things, so our thought makes our world and peoples it with our experiences. And I will add individually or collectively, individually and collectively. By activity of our thought, things come into our life individually and collectively, and we are limited only because we have not known the truth. Oh my gosh, how powerful is it to get our minds wrapped around that concept, right? We create our own reality. We create our own reality. Have you ever thought of that? Can you wrap your mind around that one? I'm gonna let Tom sleep in peace. I love the wisdom from Charles Fillmore, who was the co-founder, of course, of Unity. And he, in his book, Atom's Smashing Power of Mind, he said this: to be ignorant of mind and its laws is to be a child playing with fire, or a man manipulating powerful chemicals without knowing their relationship to one another. This is universally true, and all who are not learning about mind are in like danger, because all are dealing with the great cause from which brings forth all the conditions that appear in the lives of men and women. Mind is the one reservoir from which we draw all that we make up into our world, and it is through the laws of mind that we form our lives. Yes, we do create our own reality, because it all starts in the mind. And the reality we create is limited for one reason and one reason only, because we have not known the truth. But what is the truth that we've not known? And it is the very concept that blew my mind when I first walked into the Religious Science Church in Nashville. God in me, as me, is me. The same concept that blew your minds when you first came into New Thought or to Religious Science, Science of Mind teaching. But continuing with the Holmes quote, we have thought that outside things controlled us, when all the time we have had that within which we could have changed everything and given us freedom from bondage. You know, Jesus told us, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. It's found in John 8, verse 32. Now here's the sentence that's a little bit more uncomfortable in the Science of Mind textbook. We automatically attract to ourselves just what we think we are, and we may set it down that wherever we are, however intolerable the situation may be, we are just where we belong. We are just where we belong. That's a little bit cold, isn't it? A little bit cold. But remember, there's a higher purpose over everything, but you are where you belong and everything is as it should be. And I say that's cold, but then you ask yourself, is it really, or could it be just a deep, profound truth? That wherever we find ourselves to be is not only a reality we create, but also is perfect for us in that moment. We may not understand it.
I think it's empowering too.
Yes, it can be.
It's choice. It's just pure choice.
Right. But because we created it so that it might be a springboard for something greater and something more amazing, and that's what you're talking about, Mars, so that we might have more God experiences. You know, a child wants to find gravity as God at the center of the earth who keeps people right side up. when the world is upside down. I thought that was a neat expression. So if something seems to be happening that might argue this point, it is but consciousness expressing everything. And that's pretty inclusive, isn't it? That is part of our experience is what we have created so that we can experience more of the truth. Now remember, because God, the changeless good, is always there, then peace, joy, light, love, harmony, abundance are also always there. If only God, the changeless God, is always there, then we can walk through these moments, even the intolerable ones, with peace and knowing that they of themselves are nothing. They, meaning the steps our feet found hard to take, the things our faith found hard to meet, they, if we would but see it, are just a facade that we have invited in so that something greater can be experienced and expanded in and through our lives, individually or collectively. Sometimes that's hard to understand and hard to accept. But what we know is there is often a breakdown before the breakthrough. And the bigger the breakdown, the greater possibility for a dramatic breakthrough. Author and futurist Barbara Marx Hubbard speaks of challenges and problems as evolutionary drivers and says that crises precede transformation. Crisis precede transformation. And Abraham Hicks says that today we are standing on the threshold of transformation. And I would say we are definitely standing on the threshold of transformation with all the things that are going on in our world today. And the question is, what do we do about it? What do we do about it? Well, I'm going to give an illustration through a story. You know, there was a father that needed to choose which of his three children he would leave his business to. So he decided to give them a challenge. He told them that whoever could fill the warehouse for the least amount of money would inherit the business. Now, the eldest child bought sand, a pretty inexpensive way to fill the warehouse. And the father thought that that child would probably inherit the business. But the second child bested the first by filling it with foam peanuts, even less expensive. And the father thought, well, maybe he's the one that's going to inherit the business. But the third surprised all by lighting one candle, which filled the room with light. And it is our job in this world today to turn on the light. And we do that by realizing, in the words of the Course of Miracles, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And in the Science of Mind textbook again, Holmes writes this: remember, God is the silent power behind all things, always ready to pour into our experience that which we need. We must have a receptive and positive faith in the evidence of things not seen with the physical eye, but which are eternal in the heavens. All is mind, and we must provide a receptive avenue for it as it passes out through us into the outer expression of our affairs. If we allow the world's opinion to control our thinking, then that will be our demonstration. If, on the other hand, we rise superior to the world, we shall create a new pattern. So we are here to create a new pattern for this nation, for this world, starting today. It's time to elect the world leader, and your vote counts. So here comes the facts about the 3 leading candidates. Candidate A associates with crooked politicians and consults with astrologists. He's had 2 mistresses. He also chain smokes and drinks 8 to 10 martinis a day. Candidate B was kicked out of office twice, sleeps until noon, and used opium in college and drinks a quart of whiskey every evening. Candidate C is a decorated war hero. He's a vegetarian, doesn't smoke, drinks an occasional beer, and hasn't had any extramarital affairs. Which one of these candidates would you choose? You want me to tell you who the candidates are? Candidate A was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Candidate B was Winston Churchill. And candidate C was Adolf Hitler. So as a nation and as a world, we are at a turning point in an important breakthrough moment. And so realize this, that things are not always as they seem, are they? Because if candidate C was Adolf Hitler, he was a decorated war hero, he was a vegetarian, he didn't smoke or drink, except drinks an occasional beer and hasn't had any extramarital affairs. So things are not always as they seem. But just remember this, God is in everything. God is in everything. So you need to find the good and find the God in all situations. Because as a nation and as a world, we are certainly at a turning point and an important breakthrough moment. And we can impact that by where we put our attention and our focus on all the horrible things that we believe are happening, or on seeing God, the good, that which is real and the only thing that is real in it at all. And when you make the choice to see God in everything, you have access to a higher power than the problem. It is the transformation, the freedom, the beauty that occurs within us through these troubles where the gift is to be found. And so, are you ready, really ready now to stretch your mind and to see the good in the situations that are here? And if we had time and were in person, I would ask you to go inside and see if you could not find some good in some of the things that are happening in this situation. And you know, Millie, I'm going to ask you to make some comments because I saw some of your Facebook comments on the George Floyd situation about how, and also how the Black community is reacting to all of this. But you saw George Floyd making a sacrifice for the good of things to help with this transformation that is coming. Would you like to comment on that?
Sure, yes. Funny, I was just thinking about some of this when you said that we are right where we're supposed to be, where we belong, because I know that it offers us an opportunity for growth and expansion, and sometimes that's uncomfortable. So what has happened, I think, with George Floyd was that he was the messenger. He is the messenger to affect change. And just the idea, his sacrifice, which wasn't really a sacrifice, this is what he came here to do,
Right.
was to break our consciousness open to receive what is really going on, because the world, I think, was in a dark night of the soul, and we
Yes.
still are.
We are.
But he was the straw that broke the camel's back. He was enough. And I think that is what, all of us, not just religious science, but we all scientists, but we all need to look at the fact that enough was basically his message. And so when he came here, and now that he has communicated this, I'm seeing, I went into my own dark night of the soul, just considering all the things that has happened in the Black community and to Black people. And I know that some people don't realize that when they say, well, all lives matter, it's being dismissive.
Yeah.
It's being dismissive because of what is really going on. Of course, all lives matter. But do you have to worry about being pulled over by a policeman? Do you have to drill your children when you're white? Do you have to drill your children that when they are pulled over, make sure they have their hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, and don't make any sudden moves, don't do anything without permission. May I get my registration out of the glove box? Don't go for your phone. Don't do anything except make yourself visible and still. Do you have to have that conversation with your children when you are white? So all lives will matter when all lives matter.
Right.
And I think that I am, now that I'm in a place to receive it, because for last week I couldn't. I will admit, that for me, for anyone to even try to relate in a way or give me an example of how they understand when they are white, to me was offensive. And it is offensive to the Black community. Because you're gay or because you're this, because you're that, it's not the same thing. When you walk into a room, you're still white. I have walked in rooms in certain places, in certain states, and people stopped what they were doing. That is what is being called forth to be dealt with.
Right. Thank
And
you. Yeah.
yes, that's it.
Thank you. Well, and I gave the example years ago that Princess Diana's death was a very, very tragic situation, but there had never been anything before or since that opened the heart of England like her death created that. And I see that same type of situation with George Floyd, that he is opening the heart to make way for this transformation that we are approaching. And so that's my message today. Did I blow your mind?
Definitely.
I hope so. And so it is.
Definitely, definitely. All right. We have to always remember that we are the place where God shows up, in whatever form that's going to be.
That's right.
Am I strong enough to bear the burdens that sometimes come living this thing called life? Am I Sometimes I wonder and ponder, only to realize I'm not alone, and there's nothing that I have to do on my own, because I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place where God lives and moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. Will I have enough to do the things I need to do to take care of myself? Will I have the health of mind and body to live a life of grace and wholeness? Sometimes I wonder and ponder, only to realize I'm not alone, and there's nothing that I have to do on my own, because I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. 'Cause I am the place, you are the place, we are the place where God shows up. I am the place, you are the place, we are the place where God shows up. And I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up.
Thank you.